Now, back to Your Turn on 1330 WEBY, Northwest Florida's talk radio. The phone lines are open, so call in and join the conversation at 623-1330.
Welcome to Freedom Friday with your host, Carl Gallups. WEBY, 1330 AM, Northwest Florida's talk radio. 25,000 watts serving the Gulf Coast. We've got a great show in store for you this afternoon. Thank you for tuning in. We've got Dr. Alan Keyes, Ambassador Alan Keyes, on the other line, and he is live with us on WBY Your Turn. Dr. Keyes, welcome back.
Thank you.
Okay. Listen, let me bend your ear for a minute, Dr. Keyes, and a lot of our listeners have heard this, but of course we pick up new listeners all the time, and some who have not heard me say this. And so I want to, you so eloquently addressed the various components of this issue of the possible constitutional crisis our nation may be in concerning the eligibility of our dear leader, the one who sits in the office of presidency. And I think I understand, by piecing all the pieces together, how we could have arrived at this and why it is. Because, see, you expressed your frustration from the beginning, and so many have. Why does the Supreme Court not deal with it? Why do the district courts not deal with it? Why does Congress not deal with this? Why does Obama spend over $1 million, shut down his total identity, and then make fun of us and call us birthers for even questioning the legitimacy of our president when all he has to do is produce a birth certificate? And the frustration is why? And I'm going to tell you what my theory is, Dr. Keyes, very quickly. Here's my theory. Back during the election, when everybody had their hats in the ring, including yourself, and the thing moved on and the primaries were being held and the votes were being tabulated, it looked like for a while the front runners were going to be Hillary and Romney. And that's what the media was pushing. That's where the votes were tabulating. But as that thing moved along, Obama began to surprisingly, to a lot of people, catch up with Hillary. And he was catching up, and right when it looked like he was going to catch her or surpass her, I heard this with my own ears, saw it with my own eyes. I saw the press conference. I was in a motel room in Winter Haven, Florida, preaching a revival, and I was watching Fox News. Hillary Clinton came on the air and said that she had information that would, quote, sink the Obama campaign. And the media was all aghast, and they were all aglow with what was Hillary, what piece of meat was she going to throw out there. I waited with bated breath, Dr. Keyes, for several days for her to expose this information. She never did. Instead, what happened, Hillary and Obama began to meet. They began to meet behind closed doors. Well, of course, Obama wins, and Hillary is now Secretary of State, I think fourth in line for presidency. Well, what happens next is, of course, before he wins, McCain comes up on the Republican side. Now we've got the front runners, surprise to everybody, McCain and Obama. Now we've got a problem because McCain is not eligible to be president because he is not a natural-born citizen. He was born on a military base in Panama. And Dr. Keyes, do you remember when the Senate held hearings on McCain's eligibility?
I do.
And do you
actually, Obama eventually voted on the Senate resolution that resulted from that.
Yes, because
irony
he was.
Ironies.
Yes, irony of ironies, because he was a sitting senator. And remember what happened? The Senate passed a resolution declaring that, and I'm paraphrasing, but basically they knew and understood that technically he was not natural born, but we hereby resolve that he is eligible and fit to run for president. And of course, you know, my take on that is no Senate resolution trumps the Constitution of the United States. Am I right?
Oh, that's absolutely right.
Yeah, so their resolution about McCain's eligibility was just a farce. But in the meantime, several congressmen asked the Senate, hey, would you please do the same thing with Obama? And the Senate refused. And that was reported in the national media. The Senate refused to look. Now, here's what I think happened, Dr. Keyes. I think at that point, the Supreme Court, the federal district courts, Congress, House and Senate, of course, McCain and Obama and Hillary Clinton all knew that neither one of the front-running candidates were constitutionally eligible to hold that office. But what are you going to do at this point in the campaign? I mean, what do you do? Do you kick these two guys out when the campaign's almost over, when the election is on the eve? What do you tell McCain if he wins? I'm sorry, Mr. Military Officer, Mr. POW, Mr. Senator, you're not eligible. We're kicking you out. What do you tell Obama if he wins, the first so-called black president? You're going to kick him out and cause riots in the streets because you're going to take this, what some people think is a technicality, and put him in the streets? Dr. Keyes, I think the Congress knows he's ineligible. I think our own congressman, Jeff Miller, who refuses to address it, I think he knows he's ineligible. I think the Supreme Court knows he's ineligible. I think that's what that secret meeting was about 5 days before his swearing in. I think the federal district courts know he's ineligible. No court in this land has dismissed the case on merit. Am I correct, Dr. Keyes?
That's correct.
They have just shuffled it down to other courts. When I talk to my congressman, Jeff Miller, he says, hey, it's the court's decision to decide this. But the courts are saying it's Congress's decision.
It's the decision of whatever body or body has the opportunity to do so. People in Congress have the opportunity to do so every day because any one of them can take an initiative.
And they have a constitutional authority to do that. Do they not have constitutional authority to investigate the eligibility of the men?
How not when they hold the impeachment power?
Absolutely.
How not when it is their assigned job to oversee the carrying out of the laws by the executive, yes, including what goes in the budget and so forth. If they're dealing with somebody who doesn't have the authority to sign off on legislation, that would have a devastating impact on all their work. So, of course, they have the authority, they have the duty and obligation, and the country actually faces the imperative necessity that this question be dealt with. And I got to say, I think that what you have described sounds to me like a very accurate appraisal of events. But I would add just one thing to the mix.
What's that?
I think that some of the people who are basically going along with this dereliction of duty are doing so out of ignorance and on the basis of the very concerns you talk about in terms of the consequences.
I agree.
Of this mess.
I agree.
I look at other elements of what's going on in our society, though, including a lot of the background and inclinations of the Obama faction, as I call them. Their purposeful intention is to destroy the authority of the Constitution. He basically said openly when he was running, he questioned the founders. He questioned the whole concept of limited government.
I remember that. Yeah.
He said that the Constitution is concerned to limit government abuses, but we need to be more concerned with giving the government the power to do good things.
I remember that, Dr. Keyes. I had forgotten that. You're absolutely right.
It's also true that if you look at the pattern of behavior on the part of the folks I call the Obama faction, they come in to authority in the Congress. One of the first things they do is to try to grant Washington, D.C. voting rights in the Congress in direct contravention of the words of the Constitution of the United States. That's the first thing.
Right.
Then he tries to maneuver things to bring the census under control of the White House. Though the Constitution explicitly gives the Congress the oversight and administration of the census, not the executive branch, not the president.
Right.
But he's trying to bring it under that for his own purposes.
Right.
You see the whole thing then culminating in what went on in the Congress over these last couple of weeks, in which they were pushing forward with an effort to get something passed as law that would not have been voted on by both houses of Congress, because they had a majority in the Senate that they didn't have in the House, and they were going to use unconstitutional means to get it through.
Yeah.
So I see an attitude here. I see a purposeful intention. And I think on the part of some of these folks, they look at these things as opportunities to establish the kind of precedent that will give people the impression that, well, Constitution doesn't matter that much. It's just kind of a guide.
Yeah, kind of a guideline.
Other than that, we do whatever we feel like doing.
Yeah. I agree, and I don't know where our own congressman falls in that in those different categories. But I agree, and I have said almost everything that you have said, not nearly as eloquently as you said it, but over the last couple of years in my investigation of this matter, I've said the same thing, and I think you're dead on. Listen, let me ask you something else. Several